It's long been suspected that there's a whole different world out there that the human eye can't see. But sometimes the camera lens breaks through. On May the 23rd, 1964, Jim Templeton went out with his family for a picnic to the local marsh in the city of Carlisle in England. He noted, though it was a perfectly cool, clear, sunny day, that there were no other people in sight. They had the entire place to themselves. And this was the perfect opportunity for this enthused photographer to take some family photos. Jim squatted down, positioning himself in front of his 5-year-old daughter to snap a beautiful backlit picture. The scene was flawless. There was the lush green landscape, the clear blue sky, and Elizabeth's pretty new dress. He snapped 3 photos in rapid succession just in case his daughter blinked, and then thought nothing of it. On the way home, they dropped the film off at the lab to be developed, and several days later, they realized he'd captured a photo of the unimaginable. The lab technician who processed the film noticed that the second picture in the 3-picture sequence featured a person which should not or could not exist. Not in that amount of time and not on this planet. In fact, of the 3 pictures taken in a rapid 1-second burst, the person only appeared in the background of the middle image. Jim Templeton never once imagined his hobby would turn him into a global celebrity. But one of his casual photos, one he took with little artistic intention, became a viral hit long before the internet even existed. Because impossibly, in the background, there was a figure wearing a white suit and a white helmet complete with a dark visor. In other words, a spaceman. This mysterious photo appears to show an invisible space traveler fully dressed in an astronaut suit. This person appears to be a male with broad shoulders and a wide back. His white suit is skin tight, and he wears a helmet with some form of visor or attachment on the back. This man is standing at a distance near the horizon, partially obscured by Elizabeth's head. He faces away from the camera, resting his right arm on his hip, showing a protruding shoulder blade. Jim took the photo to the local police. By the time they decided there was nothing unusual in the picture, the lab tech had shared the photo to the Cumberland News newspaper. By the next day, it appeared in the National Daily Mail and Express. And by the 3rd day, it went global. Jim started receiving letters in the mail, first by the hundreds and then thousands. UFO researchers were seeking clarity. A lot of curious people wanted answers, and some people were eager to make this go away. The British Ministry of Defense officially stated that the photograph was of no interest to them. There was quite literally nothing to see here. Skeptics globally began to scream that it was a hoax, saying Jim simply wasn't aware of the person in the background. Amateur photographers make this mistake all the time. But Jim was no amateur. He was a local historian and professional, being paid for his photography talents constantly. But then, something happened that lended credibility to Jim's story. As happens to people who have strange experiences related to extraterrestrials, Jim received a phone call and a visit from the Men in Black. Two agents, calling themselves 9 and 11, called to have Jim take them to the location where he took this photograph. Back on the Berg Marsh, Agents 9 and 11 told Jim that they were government security men, and they showed him their cards. The cards featured the word security and had an official-looking coat of arms printed on them, and nothing else. They became frustrated when Jim not only knew nothing, but he didn't even see the spaceman himself. They climbed back into their car and drove away, leaving Jim to walk the several miles back home alone. Jim went to Detective Chief Inspector Stanley Armstrong, who said he knew nothing of any men dressed in black, and that Jim should have at least memorized the license plate number. Of course, as the Chief Inspector should know, the MIB never make it that easy to be identified. Jim felt it was a gag. Someone was pulling his leg, dressing up as government agents to have a laugh. But as you can see in the picture, if you look closely, you'll see the cooling towers of the Chapel Cross Atomic Power Station, where weapons-grade plutonium was being produced. So it was very plausible that Jim did receive a visit from the Men in Black. Galaxy Defender. I came away absolutely convinced he was telling the truth and couldn't explain it himself, although I was less convinced about his Men in Black story. Whoever it was who visited him, I don't think they were from the government. Many people were skeptical, and rightfully so. Cumberland is the opposite of a paranormal hotspot, especially regarding aliens. But that may simply be because nobody local researches or even reports extraterrestrial encounters. That is, until Jim Templeton decided to speak up, this time with real evidence. The Berg Marsh overlooking the Solway Firth should have been full of other people on such a nice day. So clearly, Jim took a picture of another person and didn't realize it. But on the off chance that Jim, his wife Annie, and Elizabeth were alone, can we trust that Jim didn't fake it? Here's all the explanations people have cooked up to rationalize what their eyes are seeing in this crazy photograph. And we're saving the best for last. New evidence that only recently became available to the public after 50 years that may finally solve this mystery once and for all. The first explanation is, it was a mistake. Jim wasn't as good of a photographer as he thought. In his Pentacon F SLR camera, the viewfinder only shows 70% of what the camera captures. So he was simply unaware of the person in the picture. But surely during the setup, Jim would have seen the person and waited for a more opportune moment to snap the picture. At the same time, amateur photographers are typically so fixated on the subject of their photos that they don't notice the background. And they're notorious for not knowing how to frame a picture. But Jim seems to have purposefully framed this picture to include the man in the background. So was it a mistake, or was he lying? And how does that explain that the spaceman is missing from the first and third pictures taken in that rapid burst? The most creative explanation is that the spaceman is actually a bird, specifically a seagull. This seagull swooped down and was on its way back up when it was caught in a funny pose. Some say the spaceman was a beekeeper. The black visor is actually a beekeeper's net hanging off of his helmet. This is a stretch, but one thing they have right is it's definitely a person. You can see his feet would have landed near the horizon, and the average person is 7.5 head heights tall, including the head. Other people figure it was a jogger or a bicycle rider who had just popped over the horizon and turned around to go back the other way. This person better be lightning fast to dodge the first and third pictures, though. The common explanation is that we can see what appears to be an astronaut suit. This alien and his spaceship must have been shielded by a cloaking device that the human eye couldn't see through. But the camera lens sees all. Many were adamant that the photo was manipulated. Jim was so sick of people calling him a liar, he got the film negative back from the lab technician and sent it over to Kodak, the company that produced the film stock. They were happy to get themselves involved, excited about the anomaly and the free marketing. Kodak determined there was zero sign of manipulation. Whatever the camera captured, it was actually in the film. The photo was legit. Obviously, there was no Photoshop or AI in the year 1964. Kodak even offered a reward of an annual free roll of film to whoever could prove the film negative was manipulated. The reward has remained unclaimed. To combat this, the skeptics asserted that Jim must have carried a mannequin or cardboard cutout into the marsh. Now, at the time, the paranormal community was having a lot of discussion about using psychic energy impressions to embed images into photographic negatives. In the same fashion, cameras could capture the energy coming off of ghosts and spirits. They propose that Jim had latent psychic abilities. Others say he snapped a picture of an angel, a time traveler sent to study nuclear energy, or the camera even peered into a parallel universe or matrix simulation. Here's the most likely answer. We aren't sure who had access to this additional photo or to which message board it was first uploaded online. But sometime around 2012, 48 years later, a photo of Elizabeth and Annie started making the rounds. The photo was from the same day and location as the infamous Solway Firth Spaceman photo. The extra info we can surmise from this new picture is that the wife Annie was wearing a light blue, sleeveless sundress. This seems to have cracked the whole mystery wide open. Compare the new photo to the original. It's very likely that Annie accidentally photobombed Elizabeth and ended up appearing as the spaceman. The visor on the helmet is her dark brown hair. She isn't wearing a spacesuit. That's her skin and dress blown out in the light due to the camera's exposure settings, which added a blooming effect that made her look larger and more muscular. She's wearing a little hat with her hair pulled up in either a French pleat or a bob cut, both typical of the 50s and 60s. She's wearing a scarf draped over her left shoulder and wrapped around the back of her neck to her right shoulder. One problem with this theory is she still looks overly muscular, though that could be an effect of the shadows caused by the sun being overhead, as noted by the shadows on Elizabeth's face. Another problem is Jim says his wife Annie was standing behind him, watching on as he took the pictures. But the big issue is, nothing else in the picture is overexposed or shows blooming. The sky, the grass, his daughter's skin tones, her dress, and even the white clouds are all perfectly exposed. Kodak, the film company, agreed wholeheartedly. And why would Annie's hair become darker instead of lighter? A British magazine called The One Show attempted to debunk the photo with this theory by recreating the conditions and camera settings. They failed, as their own overexposed photo affected everything, washing out the sky and adding a blooming glowing effect to the whole scene, which isn't present in the original. So at the end of the day, we have a viable explanation, possibly even a likely one. But it still can't explain why Annie only appears in the middle photo of 3, ones that were all snapped in a 1-second time period. And beyond that, in the coming days, something even more incredible happened that lays waste to all of these explanations. Something that seems to confirm that the photo does show a genuine, real spaceman. Recall that in the spaceman photo, we can see the cooling towers of the nuclear plant only miles away from the Berg Marsh. Just days after Jim Templeton snapped this photo, something incredible happened in Australia on the other side of the planet. In Woomera, South Australia, a planned test launch of a Blue Streak missile was in effect. The team was watching intently, ready to count down and initiate the launch. That's when they looked into their computer monitors and quickly aborted the launch. What the missile team saw was 2 abnormally large men within firing range near the launch pad. The team involved with the launch soon saw the photo of the Solway Firth Spaceman, which had spread virally all the way to an Australian newspaper, and they were astonished by what they saw. In Jim Templeton's photograph, right before their eyes, was a large man that looked identical to the 2 men that caused them to cancel their missile launch. And soon came the reports from the people in the crowd watching the missile launch. Many had witnessed a UFO flying around the vicinity. The only evidence? In a London museum's recording of the event, we find what only appears to be a lens flare. But the final icing on the cake? The missile that was gonna be launched all the way over in Australia? It was assembled at RAF Spadeadam, a Royal Air Force base right smack dab in Cumberland, just a few miles from where Jim took his famous spaceman photo. Jim Templeton and his daughter Elizabeth returned to the marsh several decades later to commemorate the spaceman picture. Of course, urged on by the local newspaper. By this time, they were sick of it. Sick of being harassed by journalists, researchers, enthusiasts, and skeptics. Because Jim and Elizabeth know something the rest of us have a hard time accepting. Sometimes things are exactly what they appear to be.